The past of man was cold as ice. He would not mend his ways. The present man is full of flame. He rushes here and there. The man to come we do not know. Make peace on earth. We're talking A Christmas Carol, score by Nick Bicât. Hit it. It was 1984. 16 Candles was in theaters. Corey Hart wore his sunglasses at night, and the George C. Scott version of A Christmas Carol had an incredible score. I'm your host, Jerry D, with another episode of Totally Rad Christmas, the podcast that talks all things Christmas in the 80s. Toys, movie specials, music, and fads. If it was gnarly during Christmas in the 80s, we got it covered. Now, joining me is an exceptionally special guest. You'll know him as a composer to the scores of Oliver Twist, The Scarlet Pimpernel, and the 1984 version of A Christmas Carol with George C. Scott. It's Nick Bicât. Nick, how's it going?
Great, thank you. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Today's my day off, so it's nice and calm and relaxing. My kids are with their grandparents, and so it's really nice and quiet in the house.
Excellent.
Well, it's very nice to meet you. You've done some fantastic things in your life. I love this version of A Christmas Carol. The score in particular, really, it's moody, it's atmospheric, but it's joyful and uplifting as well. It's warm and cozy. And knowing a little bit about music, I have a minor in music composition. So just looking at and listening to the score, it's fantastic. You did an incredible job. So I want to ask, how did you get started in music? Like, how did this whole journey begin?
Well, thank you for your remarks about the score. That's very nice to hear. Well, I started playing music when I was just a child because there was a piano in the house. My mother was very musical and she used to play quite a lot. So really, as soon as I could reach the keyboard, I started mucking around on the piano. And it just became something that I spent all my spare time on. I was always just playing around, improvising mostly. And it's just, I somehow always knew that music was my thing and that was what I was going to be doing in my life. And I've thought sort of in recent years, I remember that I used to imagine a situation and try and play it as an instrumental mood or, an emotion or something like that. So there's obviously quite a strong motivation in me to tell stories with music.
Nice. Very impressionistic.
Probably why I ended up doing this, My first job was writing music in a very small theatre where my sister was the wardrobe mistress, and the person who had just taken over the theatre said she was trying to find someone to do music for a play, and somebody cheap. And my sister said, well, my little brother writes music. So this director agreed for me to send a tape in, a cassette, and I did, and she liked it, and she asked me to do the music for a play, and I asked if I could just carry on writing for anything, whether or not there was any money. And I ended up doing music for about 15 plays there.
Wow.
And it sort of word of mouth gradually over the years. It led to people hearing what I'd done and luckily for me liking what I'd done and asking me to do other things. And that's how it became that sort of career.
Do you do most of your composing on piano then?
Partly. There's almost always piano involved, but I find that the best way for me to start, because I'm really a melodic composer, I'm much more into doing that than generating textures, not so much sort of sound painting motivated as tunes.
Okay.
To me, melody and harmony are what tell stories. And so the way I start is usually in my head for as long as possible, just trying to imagine what I feel about it and what the musical lines are that occur to me, the harmonic feel and stuff like that. And once I really have to start making it concrete, I usually make some marks on paper, just manuscript and pencil. And then I start playing either piano or guitar. And I start getting a feeling for what it sounds like in the room, because it's like a progression. When it's all in your head, it can be anything. But by the time it
True.
ends up on the paper or in the recording, that's it. It's
Right.
so you try to
Right.
hold on to the abstract part of it as long as you can because it's so flexible and you feel free to go anywhere. So yes, the piano is important. I mean, the piano, although I play a lot of guitar as well and drums sometimes, and by necessity a lot of keyboard programming because that's what we
Hmm.
all do nowadays. The
Right.
piano is a wonderful instrument for not only getting the structure of everything you're doing, seeing how the harmony is laid out, but also it makes such great sound in the room. You can't really make a nasty noise with hitting a piano key unless you hit it with tremendous force.
That's right. Or unless it's prepared piano.
Exactly. So yeah, I do use the piano at some stage. Yeah.
Okay. Well, who would you say are some of your biggest influences when composing? Are there particular composers you gravitate towards, or is it just whatever you hear in your mind and just put that on paper?
I think at this time in my life, it's all seems to be within me. But I
Right.
remember I was looking at early years and starting out. I can see influences that I had because there were really two strands to the music activity that I did. There was the writing for theatre and there was songwriting.
Mm.
I used to love songs even before I was a teenager, and obviously teenage years. I was 17 or 18 when Sergeant Pepper came out.
Oh, right.
That gives you an idea of the formative influences on me.
Right.
And when I also, as a child, my mother was very keen on the Great American Songbook, and she had records of Frank Sinatra and all these people. So I was hearing that sort of melody-driven invention a lot. So the motivation to do music kind of split always into songwriting on the one hand and dramatic writing on the other.
Hmm.
And in terms of songwriting, as I've said, it was things like the Beatles mainly during my teenage years were a big influence on me. And coming in from the classical side, it was Bach, Monteverdi, that sort of thing.
Right.
And then moving into film music, it was, I always, as soon as I saw any of those films which had a traditional Hollywood orchestral score, I could feel that that was really my kind of relationship to narrative music. That's how you have the ebb and flow of a story and the emotions
Right.
going in like a sort of landscape of emotion. And so I used to love those big orchestral scores, and I can see the influences of people like Korngold and Steiner and Bernard
Right.
Herrmann, obviously. And so that was really a big part of those early influences, and it sort of feeds into my working with Clive Donner in a way because he, as you know, he directed A Christmas Carol.
Right.
When he did a film of Oliver Twist, also with George C. Scott, the composer he used to use was not available. So he asked an agent that he knew, a musical agent, and she said, well, there's this young chap who's really mainly worked in the theatre, but you might like him because you've also worked in the theatre and you might get on.
Hmm.
So he gave me an interview. I went and talked to him in his caravan on the set of Oliver Twist. And he asked me about any film composers I liked, and I said Korngold, and that really sort of clicked with him. And he thought, yeah, I want
Right.
that kind of feeling. I want that in these films, these period films. And
Yeah.
that's really how I got that job because he liked my demo tape, but he liked, I think, the way that I felt about film music and the sort of traditions that I came from.
Did he because sometimes some directors use like a temp track to just to inspire the composer. Did he have one of those for you, or was it just basically talking it out?
No, I was so lucky to have been born and grown up in the time when people didn't use temp tracks. I
Nice.
feel so sorry for composers now who are tortured by this thing, and it's
Right.
because producers, mainly executives, have lost the skill of watching a rough cut dry with no music.
Right.
They just feel panic stricken. They don't know what to feel. So I was really lucky. I could just watch the rough cuts with no music and allow music to take shape in my head.
Yeah.
then go back to the director, like Clive, for instance, and play themes through on the piano and explain how I thought they might be used, and then move from there. And he would either say, "Yeah, well, couldn't it be more like they? Couldn't you make that feel a bit different?" Or, "May I like that one? Couldn't you use that again somehow?" And we would talk it back and forth, and I would end up. And it's difficult for people to imagine now, but when I think back to Clive coming to my piano in the basement of our house and hearing me play the three main themes for Oliver Twist rather badly on the piano and sort of talking about how I was planning to do it. And he went away and he wouldn't have heard anything else for another 6 weeks until he got into the recording studio and heard the orchestra.
Wow.
And if he hadn't liked it, that would have been terrible, but he did. But that was the level of risk that everybody had to live with in those days. And
Right.
that I feel that it's a mistake to try and hedge that risk around with all these temp tracks and references so that everybody feels paralyzed by what's gone before rather than excited by what might come next.
Yeah, you're kind of really trapped once you have this. I need it to sound exactly like that. And all of a sudden you're trapped in this box that you really can't break out of. So that's amazing. So you had 6 weeks to compose it all? Is that about how
Oliver
long it took?
Twist, I think, yeah, and the same with the Christmas Carol, it's about the same.
Okay, nice. Do you find that's a lot of time or too little time?
Oh, well, it's always too little, but in a way, because I'd done so much music for theatre and television and film, especially television, which came a bit later for me, the the discipline of a deadline, it was just something you got used to, and I became, I think, a sort of composer who depended on having that kind of pressure, and I found it very productive. And once I decided to ease off on that work, just concentrate on my own work, it's much harder to be self-motivated with your own deadline.
I I understand. I had to write a symphony at the end of my college career, and after that, I had time to do whatever, and I just didn't feel like doing it anymore. So I definitely understand. I definitely understand the motivation issue. So when you started writing it, you got the melodies in your head. You started thinking about it. Now, because it was a period piece, it's set in 1843 is when the novella came out. So did you feel constrained by that particular period, or did you feel free to move around because there are ghostly elements, and so you could incorporate more 20th century techniques into it?
Hmm. I didn't feel constrained because to me, melody, the ingredients of Western melody and harmony are so adaptable and so
Hmm.
timeless, really. If they're emotionally telling, people don't stop to think about, is this kind of melody suitable? They think about the sound, they think about an orchestra, and if it was all played on, I don't know, electric guitar, bass guitar, drums, and synthesizers, they might think, why is this being done? But that's because of the sound.
Right, right.
But I didn't feel constrained by it. In fact, I like the feeling of dropping back into, for instance, in that film, The Scarlet Pimpernel, that I think you mentioned in the introduction,
Hmm.
being able to drop back into using something like a harpsichord, you can immediately give people a reminder of the period that they're in, and then you can just draw
Right.
away from it. And as I say, you can do it with sound. And so I've never really felt constricted by that in any of those scores.
Okay. Yeah, and instrumentation especially is huge, instrumentation orchestration. So you actually work in quite a few Christmas carols into the score. Some of them are being sung by some of the street choirs and things like that.
Yeah.
I saw three ships come sailing in on Christmas Day. On Christmas
How did you decide which of the carols you wanted to incorporate? Were they period specific, or did you use some anachronistic hymns?
Um, the only, and well, Clive Donner and I talked about this a lot, obviously, because you
Right.
can't have a film called A Christmas Carol without lots of Christmas carols in it.
Exactly. Right.
And Clive wanted there to be a city waits band, that you would see them in the street playing, and they would play stuff which you also heard used in the score.
Right. Diegetic to the. Mhm.
That's right. And he wanted, in particular, he wanted one significant carol which would have a melody which could be drawn out and used as a theme for the whole score. And we talked about what that should be like and in the vaguest possible terms. And I spoke to my brother, who's a lyricist. Fortunately, I mean, we've written songs together since we were teenagers, and he's a very good lyricist. And together we wrote this carol, God Blesses Everyone. We wanted to try and write something which felt as if you knew it already. It was a traditional carol, and yet it wasn't quite. And Clive liked it very much, and he decided that that should be, melodically, should be a theme for the whole score, and you should feel that the film was framed by it, and you should see it in the street being played by people as if it existed somehow in that world.
Yes.
So the carols, the thing about carols is that that people forget that they were originally danced to. They were danced.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a tendency for them to get very solemn and heavy. And they are supposed to be danceable.
Right.
And I think that's one of the reasons why the melody of God Blesses Everyone goes from 4 to 3 and back to 4, because it's that feeling of wanting to break into dance, like a jig.
Mm-hmm. And that song is fantastic. I love it. It definitely reminds me of like Here We Come a Wassailing, how it goes, the duple to triple meter, that shift there. But you're right, structurally, melodically, and harmonically, because it's very diatonic. It's a lot of 2-5-1s and 4-5-1s, and so it feels like it's lived with us for centuries, really. I mean, since that time. So you guys did an excellent job with it. My family and I go Christmas caroling every year, and so a couple of years ago we added this song after I found the music on your website.
Oh, great!
So this is one that my brothers and I will just break into harmonies and do. So I really enjoy it, and it is fantastic. And your brother wrote some excellent lyrics to it as well. I quoted some of them in the beginning, and the whole thing just feels traditional. It feels cozy and warm, as if you could sing this at your house on Christmas Eve. It's, at a party. It's fantastic. So you did an excellent job there. And I really love this song. You also worked in a little bit, like you mentioned, in Dulce Jubilo, and I saw Three Ships and things like that. And yes. And again, the way that you interweave that with your score on top is just remarkable. So thank you for that, because I really love that.
Well, it's nice for me that the God Blesses Everyone is being used more and more by choirs in their carol services.
Yes,
especially over there in the States. I've had so many people asking for the music, and it's really lovely to feel that it's becoming part of the Christmas tradition musically.
Well, it works on two levels, right? I mean, you have the Christmas carol of it all, where you talk about the past of man, the present man, and the man to come. But then in the refrain, you talk about for Mary's son. And so there's also a religious aspect to it that works really well, and it's all tied together. So I could see this being done, yes, at a service of lessons and carols, at like an Anglican or Catholic service before the midnight mass. I could see this being done just at a Christmas concert. So it's really, really remarkable the way that everything tied together, and just it's not variety, it's ability to be played, at any kind of function. So,
oh, great.
So, we talked about Korngold. Was there any other composer that you had in mind when creating this? Because there are periods, especially when in some of the more moody atmospheric elements, where it seems like you're using like tone clusters or some more 20th century feel. So was there anything really, these sonorities that might not be categorized as strictly, diatonic chords? Was there any composer that really influenced that section, or was it just in your mind?
I think it was just in my awareness of
Yeah.
20th century classical music, which I've never been drawn to writing the kind of avant-garde concert hall contemporary music.
Right.
Because I'm, as I say, very melodically driven, more linked to the idea of popular song as a sort of core motivation in what I write. So I didn't have any particular composer in mind. I knew the feel that I wanted, and it's easy to write atonally if you choose to. It's
Right.
we all know how to do that, really. You just
Right.
displacing things, doing the unexpected juxtapositions, and just avoiding what you expect, or juxtaposing things that shouldn't be together. And there's a lot of that in the spooky music for Christmas Carol. Some of it is notated, and some of it is. I remember one of the things we did was the conductor Tony Britton, who also orchestrated almost all of the score. He conducted a choir. He'd worked with this particular choir before in past years, and we had them in the studio, the Olympic Studios in London, and we got them to do all sorts of effects, like saying "yeah" and weird spooky syllables and squeaks and screams and so on. Recorded those and sort of created a bank of those sounds. And also with the percussion section, all the business with bowing cymbals, and
Right.
scraping things, making weird noises. And we assembled all those in the studio, really. A lot of them were done as we were mixing. We would sort of combine these different ingredients. And then just to sort of fly that in over the top of normal orchestral music is a wonderfully disconcerting sort of effect.
Yes, definitely. And it was perfect for the ghost. A lot of people don't realize that when Ebenezer is confronted with these spirits, it really is terrifying to him, especially, Marley's in particular, and of course, yet to come. So again, really well done. Fantastic. I did notice you have a section with some descending thirds. It definitely evokes the Dies Irae, that classical chant of the dead from the Latin Mass. Was that intentional, or was that just a coincidence as well?
That was a complete coincidence. And you'll have to pinpoint the part of the film where that happens, because I'd be interested to study it. See what
So you can hear it in particular with Marley when Marley returns, and there's just some bum 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 bum, and just a little bit of the Dies Irae.
Okay.
So yeah,
Well, that was completely unconscious. So that's interesting. Nice to hear that.
yeah. I mean, I thought it was inspired. I thought, wow, this is amazing. Famously Berlioz, of course, put the Dies Irae in his Symphonie Fantastique, and then you can hear it all over in Star Wars and modern composition. So something that I thought was just spot on. It really hit the whole ghost theme.
Well, there's a lot of things I think a lot of things like that. You kind of absorb them as if you're a musician.
Right.
You may not always know exactly where they're coming from, but they sort of sink into the culture and then into you. It's interesting. And it's interesting what you say about Scrooge being genuinely terrified, because sometimes it's not really very frightening when you see a film of Christmas Carol.
Right.
But George Scott was very good at conveying that visceral terror, I think.
I agree.
Took it seriously without, setting it up at all. He did give a genuine feeling of somebody who was in fear of his life and damnation.
Yes.
So it was good to be able to go with that and just pile on the terror. So the climax of it really is that scene where he falls on his own grave.
Right.
And there's that sort of march like ritornello, you know, that dun 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 da dum da dum. It was lovely to write that, and they could just lay into it with lots of clangs and heavy, doomy things because he looked genuinely so terrified.
Yes. Yes, he did. I watched it again this morning, and you can see he really acted the heck out of this particular part here.
Yeah.
Yeah, everything in the score complements what's on screen. And I think that sometimes there are some composers, and I won't say which ones, but there are some films where it seems like the music tries to overstep its bounds. And in this one, I felt that the meld, the mesh of the music and the actual visuals really complement each other perfectly. And
Oh,
so,
good.
yes,
Yeah, that's great. Well, it certainly was. It was fun to do it.
yeah. Well, let me ask you real quick. Do you have a particular favorite Christmas carol?
I was wondering about that. It's very hard for me to say. There's a very beautiful. Do you know the Coventry Carol, Lule
I
Lule?
do.
Yeah,
Yes.
whenever I hear that, I think it's my favorite carol. But actually, there are a lot of them that I love, which are more upbeat, like I Saw Three Ships. I love the
Hmm.
way that melody works. I don't know what it is. There's something about it that is very simple and happy.
Yeah.
It's difficult for me to choose a single one.
I understand. And it's very same thing. It's a lot of just fives and ones in there. And it's just something about that and that particular, I mean, you and I know because we've studied music, but something about just a simple 5-1 progression that really hits home and it just feels natural and right. And so, and melodically, it flows very well. There's not huge skips. It's nothing disjointed. And I find that in God Bless Us Everyone, it takes that same tack where it's really stepwise motion. There's not these giant jumps of sevenths or anything crazy like that. And so
Mm.
it just feels natural and easy to sing, which I think a lot of times, especially in that era in particular, was not something that we heard a lot of in classical music. There was a lot of you think of the works of Alfred Schnittke or
Mm.
things like these it's just strange leaps that, and so I really enjoy that and I'm really fascinated by the fact that you take this and you make it sound like it's always been with us.
Oh, that's lovely. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. So what would you say would be your best memory or your happiest moment for working on the score?
Um, Difficult one. I think I might have to think of two. The first one was being on the set where in Shrewsbury, where they took over the town square and they added some extra shop fronts on and loads of snow, 3 different kinds of artificial snow, which made it look so beautiful. And it wasn't just something that only worked on camera. If you were standing there, it looked exactly as if you'd suddenly ended up in the Victorian era. And we had the band in the street. The same people who played for the recording, those four or five musicians, and they had to mime to their own recording, which they'd done the day before in Shrewsbury, because we got into a little studio to do it. And we got onto the set. They had to be on set at 7 o'clock in the morning, and they started running things through, and just doing the miming to playback. And Clive Donner said to Tony Britton, the conductor, who was there on the set, they look very gloomy. They don't really look happy. What can we have a word with them? And Tony said, well, the thing is, they were recording until 10 o'clock last night, and they all went out drinking. So getting up to be on set at 7 in the morning was not easy.
Yeah.
Clive Donner instructed the crew to get some of the emergency medical brandy from the truck and give them all a shot of brandy at 7 in the morning.
Love it.
And they livened up
Great.
enormously. looked much
Nice.
younger. So that was fun to do that. And the other thing was just the scoring those moments, like Scrooge's last dream, where he's in that pit of despair, and then he
Hmm.
transitioning from that to waking up and this feeling of salvation. It's lovely to be able to write for that kind of situation, where you're kind of sanctioned to release all that and just go into a sort of moment of joy.
Nice. And for me, I remember because I'd been hunting for the score for a long time, like just to be able to purchase it, and then I finally found it on your website, which was fantastic. I'm still hoping to get a vinyl of it someday. At the moment I don't own it, so I'm really trying to hunt that down. But it's just listening to the score and watching the movie, but listening to it by itself and being able to see every section as it went by, being able to picture the whole movie. For me, that was perfection because, there's some scores you hear and they just, especially nowadays with like some of the big Marvel movies, you hear the score and it's hard to tell what's what. But especially back then, you could really make out the entire movie when listening to a score. And so I applaud you for that because it does stick with you. You can tell exactly what's happening when. And that's a hard feat to accomplish.
Well, there's an interesting, that makes me think of an interesting kind of turning point in the narrative of the music that was very interesting to write. And that is when Scrooge is first taken back to himself as a young man, and he sees Belle and him as young people in love. And the feeling of that time in his mind was a long way away from the sort of envelope of the score for A Christmas Carol, because you somehow have to go back in time with him and into a simpler world. And I liked having to write that music and finding a melody that would take you back into that world. And yeah, that's the kind of thing that seems to be, at the moment, maybe it's a phase, seems to have disappeared a lot from big movie scores. The feeling that the music can enter another world and fully tell the story alongside the pictures and the words.
Right. And it definitely is to the detriment of modern film, I think. You mentioned Korngold and Steiner and some of those classics. They really knew how to take some of that music and weave it into the film. And it does seem like that's been not lost, but it's diminished.
Yes.
Where the music itself hasn't been as prominent. You think about the theme to Superman by John Williams, and everybody knows it. Superman just recently came out, so everybody knows it, and it's nice and magnificent and grand. But then you hear the theme to Man of Steel, which was released about a decade ago, and I can't sing that. And I'm a musician, and I couldn't sing it for you at all. And I've watched the movie several times, so something was missing. And God bless us, everyone in particular. It's woven throughout the score, but that, I think, is one of those pieces of music that sticks with you and stays with you and like just embeds itself in your consciousness. So when you hear it or when someone says it in A Christmas Carol, immediately it comes to mind. And so that's just remarkable to me. So again, I just have to really, really thank you for this music because it works so well and so amazing. And it really evokes the sense of the spirit of the age, of the joy of Christmas, and everything that Scrooge would have been feeling after his turn.
Well, I'm very flattered. Thank you very much, and thank you for your attention to the detail in it. It's very gratifying.
Well, and so, the last thing, I always ask a question similar to this, but, when it comes to scoring for film, kind of either reading the script or sometimes just seeing a rough cut is half the battle. What do you think the other half of the battle is?
Well, I think it depends let me see, writing the music. I think it's easy once you know how you feel about it. But I think in a way, you've got to divide that battle into two, because there's what you feel about it and how you can express it, and then how you're going to deal with the people you're presenting it to, if they have other ideas, or if they have no expectation of anything like what you're contributing. I mean, I've had a few battles in past years, about saying this is what I want to do, and then having to have an argument about why it works, or against someone
Right.
who thinks it's not what they expected. But I think that's the harder part, really, of the second half of the battle. I think it's interfacing with people who, it's not always, you can't always blame them, because people who have no musical background and yet they have quite a sort of senior position, executive position, feel that it's their responsibility and duty to understand every element of it. And a lot of people really can't understand how music works. And
Right.
if in some way it is not what they expected, I think it's very difficult for them. And again, I think this new thing of the temp track, comparatively new tradition, makes it harder for them as well. It's creating a trap for the people who instigate it as well, because
Right.
it's creating cutting rhythms and expectations of emphasis and style, which they stop even noticing after a while, but they expect in some visceral way. And I
Right.
think so I think that's one of the battles, if that answers your question.
It does. Yes, a lot. So, Nick, this has been just amazing to talk with you about this whole experience and about the score in particular. What do you got coming up? Is there anything that you'd want to plug, or anything you'd like to share?
Well, I've nothing in which is immediately happening so quickly that I can plug it, but I can tell you what I'm doing.
Okay.
I'm working on two song cycles at the same time at the moment. One is with my brother Tony again, which is a song cycle which has a theme of the circus, and the kind of circus that existed in the days where everybody travelled on horse and cart through the mud to a village to perform, that sort of circus.
Yeah.
It goes back to some songs we wrote when we were teenagers, and then rediscovering them later and thinking, why is there this connecting theme of circus? And anyway, we're addressing it now to make it into a coherent song cycle.
Nice.
And it's coming out as a commentary on a film by Bergman, which is called, it's usually called in English, Sawdust and Tinsel, but the Swedish title means The Twilight of the Jesters. And
Okay.
it's set in that world. And my brother Tony realized years later, sort of 30 years after the event, that he had seen this film and it had somehow stuck with him. And the imagery of this kind of world and the struggles and the link that it has to commedia dell'arte, the
Mhm.
archetypal characters, was really what was attracting him. And as we became grown ups, we found we occasionally wrote songs which harked back to this world. So we've come face to face with it now, and the song cycle comes out as a kind of sung commentary on the film. And our idea is to perform it with bits of narration in between to sort of give an angle from the point of view of the characters in this kind of world. So that's one thing. And the other thing is another song cycle with a director I've worked with called Philip Ridley, who is a completely different sort of filmmaker. But we've written a lot of songs together, including songs for P.J. Harvey, who you might know as
Mhm.
and various people. But anyway, that's a different song cycle, which again a bit difficult to describe, but it's got a whole range of songs. It's taking themes from children in war zones and taking you through various sort of different situations, supported by the idea of love and humanity, having some kind of resolution at the end. And more immediately, I suppose, is something I did a workshop on last year, which is a musical theatre piece about a man called Ignatius Sancho, who was in 1760-ish, was the first man of colour to vote in Britain.
Oh,
He was
wow.
born on a slave ship, and he became a very big member of society. He became a composer, an abolitionist, and he ran a shop. And he became quite a notable citizen and achieved an awful lot. And because he was based in Greenwich, this theatre company in Greenwich commissioned this work. So having done it in a workshop form, we're now working on it to be a larger theatre event.
Nice.
That's my sort of timetable for the next year or so.
That's exciting. Can't wait to, I mean, I hope they'll be available.
Oh, well, I'll let you know. I'll keep you in my mailing list.
Yes, please. I'd really enjoy that. I really would. I love your style of composing and I love your style of just music in general. So yes, I'd really love to be on that.
Thank you.
So thank you again. This has been lovely. Brilliant composer. I again, I cannot, I can't stop talking about how well this score works with this particular film. And I just thought every time I see it, I'm immediately just transported back to the first time I saw it. I remember seeing this, years ago as a kid, and it's phenomenal. So once again, just thank you so much for speaking with me.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for getting in touch.
And on that note, I'll end it with, so grant us all a change of heart, rejoice for Mary's son, pray peace on earth to all mankind, and check us out on our social media pages, which you can find at linktree.com/totallyradchristmas. And if you're feeling like incorporating classic carols into your movie score, leave us a review on iTunes. It helps us reach more people and spread some rad holiday cheer. Now, don't forget to check out our merch shop on tpublic.com and our super dope website, totallyradchristmas.com. God bless us, everyone. Later, dudes.
Rejoice for Mary's son, with peace on earth.